I was amazed that I was considered to sing with Peabo Bryson, that I knew and that I really enjoyed and loved, and it became a very huge success.
For 35 years, fans had a theory about Peabo Bryson and Celine Dion, and nobody could prove them wrong. Then Peabo died, and Celine posted 7 sentences before the day was even over. Was it what she admitted, the romance everyone suspected, or something the world never thought to look for? And why had she never once said it while he was still alive? Join us as we uncover the relationship nobody ever correctly named. The boy nobody thought would last. Peabo did not grow up with a piano in the living room or a parent who mapped out his future in music. He grew up in the red clay dirt of South Carolina, on his grandfather's farm, in a small town called Malden, the kind of place where you either got out or got comfortable staying. His mother, Marie, wasn't a musician herself, but she made sure her children heard the great ones live, and standing in those rooms early is what lit Peabo's fire. By the time he was 12, he had already won a local talent competition. By 14, he was no longer competing. He was working. He joined a local Greenville band called Al Freeman and the Upsetters as a backup vocalist at 14 years old, working professional gigs while other kids were still in school. But there was a problem with his name. His middle name, Peabo, a French West Indian name his mother had given him, was too complicated for the band leader to pronounce, so he simplified it. Peabo became Peabo. 2 years later, at 16, Peabo left home entirely. He hit the Chitlin circuit with another local band, Moses Dillard and the Textown Display, playing the string of segregation-era Southern venues that had launched more black music careers than any record label ever could. It was hard work, and it showed in everything he did after. By the time Bang Records general manager Eddie Bisco overheard him during a session and signed him not as a performer, but as a songwriter, producer, and arranger, Peabo was barely an adult. His solo debut came in 1976. His records climbed the R&B charts through the late 70s and into the 80s. Songs like Feel the Fire and If Ever You're in My Arms Again built his solo reputation, while his duet with Roberta Flack, Tonight I Celebrate My Love, turned them into one of the defining pairings in 1980s R&B. He became known as the Voice of Love, and the nickname stuck because the music made the case. He released albums steadily for 5 decades, charting across R&B, pop, and adult contemporary. He earned multiple top 10 albums on the Billboard R&B chart and became one of the most consistent charting artists of his era. By 1991, Peabo was 40 years old, with 2 decades of R&B behind him and enough commercial weight that when Walt Disney Pictures called, his name was the insurance policy. But the young woman they paired him with, the one they were not entirely sure about, her story is the one nobody saw coming. She was nobody, and he changed that. She was 23 years old, French-Canadian, from a small town in Quebec, the 14th child in a family of 15. She had been singing professionally since she was a teenager, had released more than a dozen albums in French, and had won the 1988 Eurovision Song Contest, representing Switzerland, not Canada, because no Canadian broadcaster had entered that year. In France and Canada, her name meant something. In the United States, it meant almost nothing. English was still a language she was building. She'd sung internationally in French throughout her career, and recording a pop song in English for an American audience was an entirely different discipline. She had already faced one high-profile pass, considered for a major animated film's song, before the label went with an artist with a bigger American profile. The message was clear. The U.S. market didn't know her yet. When Disney approached her again, this time for the title song of their new animated film, Beauty and the Beast, her first instinct was hesitation. She was still uncertain about the language. Disney paired her with Peabo, the established American name, and placed their bet on a French-Canadian girl the U.S. hadn't found yet. She walked into the power station in New York, aware that she was the lesser-known name on the poster and still learning the language in which the song was written. Then, Peabo walked in. What they built inside that studio could not have been predicted by anyone who saw only the paperwork. But how they got there, Celine would spend 35 years describing it in the same way. He made her comfortable, not as a professional courtesy, but as a pure act of generosity. He was the bigger name, the established star, the one with the leverage, and he used all of it to make her feel like she belonged. He sang with her, as she had always belonged in that room. The song they recorded together was released with the film in November 1991, reached number 9 on the pop charts, and became one of the most recognized Disney songs ever made. And for Celine, it was the moment that turned her from an international name into an American one. But while everyone was watching what happened in that recording studio, almost nobody knew what Celine was already carrying. A secret that would reframe every theory fans had built about what was really going on between her and Peabo. The world had a theory. The music video for Beauty and the Beast was filmed right there in the recording studio. The cameras captured exactly what the microphones had just recorded. Two voices finding each other, two people leaning into a love song with a warmth that did not look like a performance. It looked like the truth. The video premiered on VH1 and reached audiences who had never seen Celine before. What those audiences saw was a young woman standing beside a seasoned performer, not hiding in his shadow, but rising next to him, note for note, look for look. The chemistry between them was visible and effortless, the kind that no director can manufacture and no edit can fake. At the 1992 Academy Awards, Angela Lansbury joined them for a medley of both versions of the song, but it was Celine and Peabo that the cameras kept returning to. The following year, at the 35th Grammy Awards, Beauty and the Beast won Best Pop Performance by a duo or group with vocals. They accepted together. They stood together. They smiled the way people do when they both know what they built together. Fans noticed. The internet was barely a thing, but the speculation ran through every tabloid, phone call, and VHS rewind. Peabo didn't cool the speculation. In later interviews, he would consistently describe her as extraordinary. He placed her alongside Roberta Flack and one of his two favorite people in the industry, and those weren't the words of professional courtesy. So the suspicion made sense. The world saw what it saw and drew the obvious conclusion. What the world did not know was this. While Celine stood in that studio singing a love song with Peabo, she was already secretly engaged to someone else entirely. His name was René Angelil. He was her manager, 26 years older than her, and he had been the most important person in her professional life since she was 12, the age at which her brother sent him a demo tape that stopped him cold. He had been so moved by what he heard that he mortgaged his own house to fund her first album. He had built her career from nothing, shaped every professional decision, and stood beside her at every turning point. And by the time Beauty and the Beast was recorded, Celine was already wearing a ring that the public would not know about for 2 more years. She revealed the engagement in 1993, in the liner notes of her album, The Color of My Love. In a handwritten passage addressed directly to René, kept inside a record that millions of people would hold in their hands, she wrote that she'd kept their love hidden for years, until it outgrew every container she'd put it in. The world's assumption about Celine and Peabo had not been malicious. It had simply been wrong. What everyone suspected between them was never the relationship that was actually there. The real hidden story lay elsewhere entirely, and it was far more complicated than anything the cameras ever captured on an awards stage. But what happened to Peabo in the years after the Grammy, when the spotlight moved on and the bills did not? The government came for his Grammys. On August 21, 2003, men from the Internal Revenue Service arrived at Peabo's home in Atlanta, Georgia. They were not there for an autograph. The debt he owed was $1.2 million in unpaid federal taxes, accumulated over nearly 2 decades. And on that August morning, the government came to collect. They took the grand piano, the soundboard, the mixer, multiple gold records, and a key to the city of Miami with hundreds of pairs of shoes. And then they took both of his Grammy Awards, the 2 trophies that represented the highest public recognition his career had ever received. Both of them boxed up and carried out. The items were auctioned publicly. Strangers bid on the contents of Peabo's life, and a career that had generated millions of dollars dissolved into a government ledger. Fame hadn't protected him from financial ruin. It had just been postponed. But there was something about Peabo and the kind of life he had built. One of his close friends went to that auction, bid on his Grammy for A Whole New World, won it, and then drove it back to Peabo's door and handed it to him. There was no need for an announcement. Just a friend who couldn't accept the idea of Peabo Bryson living without his Grammy. Peabo eventually rebuilt. He released more music, continued to tour, and, in 2018, put out a new album called Stand for Love, produced by the legendary Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, a creative partnership that signaled his voice still had a place at the table. His wife, Tanya, gave birth to their son on New Year's Eve, 2017, a boy who would eventually climb on stage beside him. In 2019, a heart attack put him in an Atlanta hospital. He recovered and kept recording. Those who watched him in those final years said fatherhood had changed something in him. He talked about his son the way men do when a child arrives late and lands with full weight, like a second chance. They did not know they were still owed. He was still recording, still showing up. Then, on May 31, 2026, he had a stroke. He never recovered. And 2 days later, on June 2nd, Peabo was gone. He died at a hospital in Marietta, Georgia, at 75 years old, surrounded by his family. Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens paid tribute. R&B singers from Jody Watley to Kenny Lattimore posted. His family said he transitioned peacefully. The homegoing service was held on June 22nd at Antioch Baptist Church in Atlanta. It was private, invite-only, and live-streamed for fans who could not attend in person. Regina Bell sang, B.B. Winans sang, Ruben Studdard sang, and the day he died, Celine Dion sat down and wrote something. What exactly did Celine say? And why did those words hit differently once the whole story was understood? 7 sentences. The tribute appeared across Celine's social media on June 2, 2026. The same evening, his death was confirmed, featuring a photo of them at an awards show, both young. Celine wrote that the world had lost Peabo Bryson, and she was heartbroken. She wrote that his voice and his kind spirit embodied the beauty of song and performance. She said he had been wonderful and generous to her all those years ago in the recording studio. And then she wrote the sentence that made people stop. She said he would remain for her always as a real symbol of the joy that music had brought to her life. Consider what Celine was when she wrote those words. She was 58 years old. She had spent the last 4 years fighting stiff person syndrome, a rare neurological condition so aggressive that it had locked her muscles, compromised her voice, and threatened the thing she had built her entire life around. She had watched herself, in her own documentary, convulsing on a bed while tears ran down her face, unable to stop her body from betraying her. She had stood on the Eiffel Tower at the 2024 Paris Olympics opening ceremony and sung L'Hymne à l'amour while the world held its breath, because nobody was sure her voice would hold. But it held. She had also spent years learning to live without René, her husband, her manager, the person who had built her career alongside her, who had been gone since January 2016. She still considered herself married to him. She still sometimes spoke about him in the present tense. So when Peabo died, Celine wasn't writing from solid ground. She was writing as someone who knew exactly what it cost to lose a person whose voice had mattered. He had given her the one thing she couldn't give herself in that moment, the feeling that she belonged. That's not romance, but it's something. It is the kind of bond that does not have a clean name because the music industry was not built to name it. It's what happens when one artist looks past the business of it and treats the person in front of them like they already matter. For 35 years, fans had suspected something between them. They were right. They just had the wrong word for it. What existed between Celine and Peabo was not a secret romance. It was one human being choosing, when nobody required it of him, to treat another with unreserved dignity. And she never forgot it. But if that was the relationship, what did it actually build? And what did the cameras spend 3 decades failing to see? What he gave that the cameras missed. There is a reason Beauty and the Beast has never stopped playing. It is on every wedding playlist. It finds people in the quiet rooms they didn't know they were sitting in until 4 notes hit and 30 years collapse. Songs don't last 35 years on production quality. They last because something true was already in the room when they were recorded. And truth doesn't expire. What Peabo and Celine made in that New York studio in 1991 was technically a Disney commission, a contractual obligation. 2 voices brought in to do a job. But what made it survive was not the contract. It was the moment inside it, a generous man and an uncertain woman finding a frequency together and holding it. All the music videos, Grammy stages, and awards show performances that followed were just the delivery system. The actual thing, the irreducible core of it, was 2 human beings in a room choosing to be present with each other. He was a duet partner by nature, not by calculation. He spent the rest of his career the way he spent that afternoon, bringing out the best in whoever stood beside him. The voice of love wasn't a nickname someone pinned on him. It was a description of how he moved through rooms, how he treated the person standing next to him, how he made them feel like the one the song was waiting for. 2 people stood on the same Grammy stage, and the industry carried one of them into arenas. The other fought the IRS for his Grammy back. Her career became one of the most commercially successful in the history of recorded music. He struggled. She soared. And yet he never, in any documented interview, expressed anything but pride and warmth when her name came up. And Celine carried what he gave her into every room she entered after that. The confidence that took root in that recording session traveled with her to every English-language album, every arena tour, every moment she stood in front of an English-speaking crowd, and sang as though the language had always been hers. He handed her that confidence freely, with no idea what she was about to become. He was just being Peabo. Now he is gone. And the woman whose voice he helped build in her own words told the truth about what he had meant. That was Celine's admission. The boy who left a farm in South Carolina at 16, with nothing but a voice, gave something away in a New York recording studio in 1991 that he never asked to have returned. And the woman who received it became one of the world's most recognizable voices. That exchange was never in any contract. It was never captured by any camera. It happened in the space between two people choosing, for one afternoon, to be fully present with each other. That is what the cameras missed, and what she finally said. That was the only relationship this story was ever about. He was the voice of love. Not just for what he sang, for what he gave, freely, to anyone who stood beside him and needed it. And she never forgot. Did the industry take everything it needed from Peabo Bryson and then leave him? Or did Peabo get exactly what he came for? Do you think Celine was waiting for the right moment? Or did she need to lose him before she finally had permission to say it out loud? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.